Well, hello, one and all. Let us begin our journey as we dive down deep into the dark realms of the subterranean world. So bring your torches, polish up that dark vision, get your lanterns filled with fire beetles and other accoutrements. We are going to dive into the subterranean world yet again, simply because the first time we had so much else to really talk about, but also I want to give a little bit of insight into my writing process. So I'm kind of combining this with a comment a viewer asked about my writing process, and I didn't want to put it off too long. And also, Prue asked in the Discord, if you join the Discord, there's a special channel, hashtag questions for DBJ. And in there, you can place certain questions. So Prue asked about doing a heist. So look for that video coming up relatively soon. But today, oh, wow. You know what? Scott Post says in the in the chat that he couldn't find a notification. I think that's a condition of YouTube, that even with ringing the bell for the notifications, that people are not receiving it. I'm not sure why, especially if you're consistently watching a channel or something. I've got a ton of channels I subscribe to, and I listen, like podcast wise, I listen to a lot of videos, and I had to physically go back in and take a look and see what they've done. So I think that's just part of their new algorithms or whatnot. I don't particularly like it, but what can you do? So I wanted to revisit the Subterranean world, because I think there was a ton that we didn't uncover, and B, my writing process and philosophy on producing material that I think people would enjoy, and to give some other people who want to write for any kind of publication, whether it's 5th edition or anything like that in the RPG community, why it is that you should write it a certain way or shouldn't, not from my opinion, but from yourself coming up with your standards. So for those who don't know, I write books. They're titled Cinematic Environs. Currently, I am working on all of the quote unquote like natural environments. So we have like mountains and Arctic reaches and things like that. A survival book, completely detailing just surviving out in the wilderness. We've got a deep sea book, and planes even is quite big. And so not the next one, but the one that I'm currently working on is the Subterranean realm, along with cityscapes and battlefields. And there's even a book that like pops up out of the mundane realm into the more arcane, which is an aerial book, etc. Tesla Ranger says, yeah, I had to keep refreshing my subscription page. Yeah, I think this is a YouTube hazard that they've created, maybe to push for more corporate links, so that people go towards like sports and education and things like that are quite larger. For somebody like me who in the larger scope of the YouTube realm doesn't have very many subscribers, that means that they have very few eyes on subscriptions in general. And because I'm not a advertising powerhouse, they're probably going to push me down to the bottom. I mean, it's just the way it is. I don't know why you have to jump through hoops. If you click someone and you subscribe to them and you click the fact that you want notifications from them, I don't see what the problem is. But I don't see why they should change an algorithm. You should get what you asked for. So like, this is an educational. I don't know if I'm teaching bad habits or something like that. What have you? So thank you. But writing process. So for me creating the cinematic environs, I really wanted to develop the third pillar, right? That the third pillar of adventure, which is exploration in role playing games, and that exploration to me, according to fifth edition, right, is like using layers, using traps, hazards, puzzles, obstacles, just being very. My other passion are movies, and I love action movies and that kind of thing. And so the cinematic part of it, I want that. I want there to be actionable um, things to use in each environment. And then the second part of that is environs. So I wanted to use the environment. So putting those together. So I use the word actionable. And the reason why I say that, because I have my own, like, I want to create something that I think people can touch and feel and immerse themselves into. And so whenever I've written any of the books, I do some research and then I have to cut a lot of that research out because while interesting for me, it may not be something that pushes the drama forward, pushes the tension forward, or anything like that. So one of the things about the subterranean world, a lot of times we think about is like, imagine all the deep, dark races, the drow, the pronounced Dwygar or Durgar, purple worms and land sharks, bullets or something. All these things that go down deep. And so we think of surface world, corridors, big societies that live in the Underdark, which is a trademark thing. Really, if I used Underdark, capital U, I could get sued for that. It's quite illegal. But RP Gamer says, "Wish I could join you, but the kids weirdly want to do things with me." Yeah, I think you're a person I'd like to play with. Scott Post says, "Mini games that help the environment." Mini games that help make the environment a thing to overcome are always welcome. And any of you guys who take a look at some of the reviews out there, go to Drive Through RPG and take a look at them. You'll notice that I don't try to exceed the rules that are already presented in front of you. Instead, I want to make a tension generator, not to diverge off of something else. Yeah, exactly. Not to diverge off of something else, but there's another game called the ICRPG, Index Card RPG, and it's literally those letters, like not icy as in a tasty frozen dessert, but ICRPG by Runehammer. Excellent game, rules light, and he also wants to develop like that tension creating thing. And so the environment is like this unfeeling moving miasma of hazard that should be used and abused and avoided and used against enemies and all those kind of things. An example would be, let's take your adventurers are going down deep in the caves, and you want to make an encounter with a bad guy. Maybe there's like troglodytes or something, right? And yeah, Index Card. It's great game. I don't have it nearby. So anyway, so you want to make it more dynamic, right? So you're like, okay, they're fighting troglodytes. It's it's a boring, it's a flat room. They're fighting. There's nothing in this particular cave, no matter how much I describe it, that affects the combat. And you're saying to yourself, well, I want to make all of my combats and my encounters engaging, but what can I do? Well, sure, you can change the enemies around, change some of their stat blocks. I've always pushed changing their motivations. Not everything just wants to fight till it dies. Creatures want to steal things or achieve a goal, like maybe stealing a gem that's hanging from the ceiling, or stealing people's backpacks because they have their food in it or something like that, or kidnapping one of the party members and trying to run away with them. Anything like that, protecting their young, doesn't matter. But we're also missing the environment. If you're going to go down deep into the underworld, why not use it? So let's say we have a collapsing ceiling, and along with it affecting the player characters, it can affect the enemy. Okay, let's do something like that. So what you do is you can have an opportunity for certain players to realize that the ceiling may collapse. Maybe there are these troglodytes have a deal with these kobolds who set up traps that once they remove pins or something, the ceiling will collapse on purpose because they set it up that way. Maybe there's like tons of stone held by webs up above them that if they pull it, the ceiling begins to collapse. Or maybe it's just an unexplored just a natural part of the environment. Hey, you're down there having these fights and all this commotion or sound, or someone casts a thunder spell, damage source spell, and then it starts to make the ceiling collapse. There are many tricks you can use other than make a save and get hurt. So, for example, you can roll a die. Maybe roll a D4, D6, leave it on the table, boom, right in front of everybody. Metagame the whole damn thing, right? Bam. You roll a 3. And everyone's like, oh, why did GM roll a 3? Oh. You just roll a 3 and just fold your arms and sit back and you start counting down. Oh, what are you guys doing? Oh, I'm going to shoot my bow. I'm going to do this. 1. Why is he counting down? Okay. Do some things. The next round, 2, and then now they're thinking, okay, something's going on here. Can I make a roll to investigate what's going on? Hey, I'm a dwarf. I've got stone cutting. Do I get a bonus for that? Yes, you notice that there's crumbling from the ceiling, and you don't even have to have them detect it. You can say the ceiling's starting to crumble, and you see gravel pouring down from a crack from above. When you take a closer look or something, you can see there are fractures all across the ceiling. Be careful, or just say, hey, a big chunk of stone falls down and kills one of the troglodytes that's about to attack you, and they seem hesitant as they look up with their jagged spears or something like that, but they have no intention of backing down. You can always do some descriptor of that nature. Okay, you rolled a 3 on round 3. Here we go. Pick an initiative. I usually pick initiative 10 because the mundane world, I think, should a little slower. So act on initiative 10. Have them make their saving throws. Have them have to make a decision of where they move to, whether they want to take cover, whether they want to take a dodge action or some kind of disengage action or something like that. Maybe the spellcaster intended on casting a lightning bolt spell is like, I better save because I got my shield spell, but I need something else to protect me, or the cleric is thinking about something else. And this adds something far more dramatic into the scene, including against the enemies that they're fighting. Now, of course, there's enemies that are adapted to specific regions like the Arctic or the desert, the deep sea or something like that, but whatever. So now the other part, sorry, without turning my fan on, there's so much static electricity. So Subterranean world, there is a lot of space between the surface of the earth and that nebulous region, the center, the core, the hollow earth. There's miles and miles of passages and things of that nature, and many of them have hugely different designs, simply because of the environment. So after doing some research, there are plenty of different cavern shapes, sizes, the ways they're shaped, and so I've begun using them as descriptors and then finding stories inside of those. Let me give you an example. The caves are created in different ways, and I came up with names to call them that are appropriate for a role-playing setting, whereas I'm probably making some geologists out there probably going to scream and yell or whatever. But caves are created in many ways. There's caves created by corrosion, caves created by burrowing, caves created by rifts and tectonic plates and lava tubes and all these kind of things. And using how a cave is created can actually give you a couple of ideas on using things. For example, caves created by corrosion could be through dripping water, through acids and whatnot. So, okay, that means that maybe there's oozes, or the caves are slick, or Or there's a possibility that because of the corrosive effect of running water, that behind the stone walls or even above you in aquifers, there are or aquifers, there are pockets of water that could be dangerous in itself. So the players may go down deep into the caverns and they see water trickling from the wall, and then someone maybe bumps against it or scrapes, and you scrape just a little bit of dirt, and all of a sudden the place starts to flood a little bit, and it goes from a trickle to like a faucet that's on, and then okay, that pressure is starting to release, and then all of a sudden the water starts filling up past the ankles and then past the knees, et cetera, et cetera. So you can use like all kinds of hazards underground, like flooding, pools of acid, pockets of methane gas, noxious fumes, things that'll put you to sleep, and so on and so forth. Other than corrosional caves, you've got caves created by glaciers and frozen ice. So you can have, especially towards the surface, the surface crust of the world. You have places where the frost, the thaw and freezing elements means that the water that seeps down underground becomes frozen, and you can have a wall of ice blocking a passage. You can have slick surfaces for people to walk on. There are burrowing tunnels left behind by your classic purple worms and boulets that are, dig and tunnel through many places. You have hive creatures like ants and ankhegs and spiders, trapdoor spiders and such that also make passages, as well as dire badgers and other burrowing animals. And so those are passages as well, filled with animals and creatures and monsters. Maybe the player characters have to evict them, essentially, or use the burrowing passages that may now be empty. Of course, looking for the young, looking for the places where some of these subterranean creatures leave their offal, their feces, which may give a clue as to what they're eating. There could be some previous adventurers that they've kind of digested and crapped out the back end. If you're willing to wipe off the sword, maybe it might be a really good weapon. These things also, something that I think that's often ignored, because we tend to remember maps that were like 10-foot squares, is that caves are not universally a size applicable for medium-sized creatures, right? We human beings tend to be humanocentric and think that, oh, we're just going to go underground in my plate mail and just walk around. But that's not always the case. Squeezing through tight surfaces, mazes of stalagmites and stalactites that have grown as if it's alive, dripped to various sizes, makes navigating some of these places extremely difficult. And so you may have to crawl on your stomach or go through a very narrow vertical channel just to move through some place in order to go from one place to another. And that can be very vulnerable if the players have to crawl through a space, drag their belongings, take off their armor, unable to push their spear or pole arm through a narrow opening, or even use it as a weapon in a very tiny, cramped location. Scott Poe says, put mysterious runes on the wall in that about the flood chamber, so the PCs have a reason to stay longer than they should. And that's a perfect side note, analysis paralysis. So I've seen in very many social media forums people talking about, how do I push my players forward? And I'm always a big proponent of things that motivate players. If players don't move, the world should move them. And sometimes you want the tension to be there. So you have players there's these special runes on the wall. Okay, they might want to stay there for hours, days, weeks trying to read these runes, and you're sitting there behind the DM screen, trying not to show your faces. Like, guys, listen, just read the runes and move. Come on, there's nothing else here. I look for traps again, and you're rolling your eyes. You're like, come on. the room is starting to flood. Now it's like, okay, how long do they stay there trying to read these runes? How long do they copy them? I'm going to use chalk to copy the. You may not have time to do a charcoal rub of the runes or whatever. Maybe one of the players has to pull out their book to compare notes, but at the same time, the room is flooding. And what is that rubs against my leg? These are things like you can just start to ramp up the tension, to move. If the players don't move, use the world to move them. Whether it's things that are flooding, it's getting colder or hotter, rumbling underground. I'm just talking about Subterranean, but you can use this for anything. The weather starts to move in, enemies start to go by, animals start sniffing around, they hear strange sounds, noises, smells, the air pressure changes. All those things are little hints and clues, little unknowns maybe that you could sprinkle in there, like a seasoning. You don't want to overdo it, because then you'll push them into becoming paralytic in their analysis, but just enough, just a little bit of flavor. Prue also says, also when you get a scrape in a damp, unknown environment, who knows what pathogens are there? You'll be busy transversing rugged underground terrain and not realize that your scrape is acting weird. Oof. Scott says cave eels. They only eat genitals. Well, they're most genitals are flavorful. I'd have to say. I don't want to talk about my experiences. Just let it be known that just a little bit of spice and delicious. So, Prue says getting a scrape is another. Okay, let's look at this as yet another hazard. Having infections, oozes, mold, fungus down deep underground. Who knows this? It might grow in open wounds, grow in damp backpacks, growing on the wizard's spell book, needing to stay clean. And all these things are not just hazards, but they are obstacles. Okay, so players may have to rethink their actions. The player that's the paladin in the shiny silver armor carrying around the lance may have to rethink what he or she is doing. Now, it doesn't mean that you're trying to use the quote unquote nerf the player characters. No, it just means that here's an obstacle. Think of a way to overcome the obstacle. And Scott Post, yeah. I mean, if you're moting them to move it along, holding on to the genitalia might be prudent in a flooding chamber, right? You don't know what's rubbing against your leg. And the thing is that you can leave little clues. For example, we've got the eels that are looking for some tasty treats, but that may also leave a clue as to maybe escape this room. And because they came from somewhere, that means they've got to go somewhere else. Maybe they were released here on purpose, or maybe there's fresh water that they can use to clean their wounds or something like that. So it's not a matter of, hey, I want to create things that are constant problems for the players that they can't overcome. It's the opposite. My point is to create obstacles that make it more dynamic, to get people to be creative, and to not predict what the solution is. Create the problems, don't create the solutions. If they come up with a great idea, hey, I'll cast Spider Climb on the paladin who is unable to wear his armor now, so that the paladin can climb up the walls, but the paladin's a greater, warrior and can stay out of the water, while the rest of us, the rogue, tries to swim under the water to find the crack and whatever. You go, I'll put the barbarian on my tensor's floating disc. It used to be tensors. I think it's just floating disc now. So he can fight. If they come up with a great idea, go for it. That sounds great to me. Game master, I didn't even think about that. Great idea. And if that means that this particular flooding room with the runes on the wall is overcome very easily, shruggable. You got other rooms. It's not like you're running out of caves or something, right? Prue says, threatening a wizard spell book. I haven't tried that one yet. You got to be real careful about that one, because threatening a spell book is the equivalent to preventing a warlock from talking to their patron, taking away the spells of a cleric from their deity. Like, it's like, give the hint of a threat, but you don't want to go down deep with the threat, right? Be, because you don't want to fall too far into the, hey, I'm nerfing one of my player characters. Now it could be that that it's just a matter of they need to wipe it off, or they need to spend an action to get rid of it, that kind of thing. And I like those ideas where it's, you have a number of actions. You might need to spend one or more to prevent some kind of debilitating effect, or not ignore, but deal with the debilitating effect until the player character has a chance to get rid of it. For example, it could be a dusty chamber, or filled with smoke, or extremely muddy, or filled with a nasty fungus or mold or ooze that gets on their clothing, or gets into their eyes, or obscures writing. So a wizard's book could have the pages obscured with writing and they can't read it, including maybe the walls, or maybe there's glyphs on the walls that can't be read. And if it's wiped away or washed away, all of a sudden it becomes visible. So maybe the barbarian is covered in muck and can't see, getting disadvantaged to hit something, unless the barbarian spends like a bonus action or something like that to scrub, put his head or hand under the water, under like the flow of the water, scrub the stuff away, that kind of thing. I'm not describing that very easily, but I mean, coherently, but I know what I'm talking about. Proof says most eel types can climb overland for days, sometimes more, but the principle's good. And yeah, we want to make it solvable when we threaten a character. Agreed. Yeah, just a hint, like when Indiana Jones almost loses his hat. Exactly, right? Got to snatch that hat back. And what a really cool way to reward somebody for their little role-playing thing. It's like, you need to get out of there. And he's like, I'm not leaving my hat. And then there you go, dude. Here's some inspiration, man. But also caves, of course. There's a whole video about darkness and dim light and dark vision that I did. I'm not going to go into that. Needless to say that dark vision is not a perfect system to overcome complete darkness. Details corresponding in other videos. I might even put a link. I'll probably forget to put the link in. Doesn't matter. But not only are there caves where you can use water as a threat, you have maybe flammable gases, methane gases, and things. So if someone decides to use that pyromancer in the group, if they smell that methane gas and they still attempt to do it, it could be a danger to themselves and others. Or maybe the player characters want to draw the enemy close to them, and the archer wants to fire a flaming arrow to ignite the methane gas escaping from the earth, or what have you. Down deep, you have oil. So you could have oil slicks, flammable oils, sinkholes, traps. Imagine yourself being inside of a what's it called? Timer. Why did my brain? There I go again. My brain just farted, even though I have it written down. And anyway, you could be inside of an area where there's like you're at the bottom of a sinkhole, so all the sand and grit, or like gravel and debris is pouring down into a cave, and they're at the bottom of it. Or the players are on its upper surface, and it's like quicksand, or like being inside of where the sand is all pouring into like a whirlpool down into another lower chamber. Same thing can happen for water, where you have underground waterfalls or lakes or something. It could be rushing, like a rushing river, and the players have to roll to resist being pushed downstream, or the water is flooding the chamber with such force that they have to hold on to something, as well as hold their breath and not drown, or watching out for their things to get washed away before it flows over top of them, or down into an unknown chamber. Because I love flooded chambers. To me, first of all, being underwater is a big enough threat anyway, and having an enemy down underwater with you, like the classic crocodiles or some tentacles or any creature like that is terrible in and of itself. But to not be able to see, not be able to be protected with your shield and sword and armor, and not knowing how far you have to travel underwater, or being trapped in a location where the only air you can recover is in maybe like a 6-inch gap in the ceiling, and then have to dive down deep yet again, I think is a great threat you can put into your adventures. As well as the fact that if the water is flowing like a raging river where it's flowing with force, people can get pushed away. Enemies that were in range for one round end up getting pushed and separated again as they flow downhill, or you let go so that you can grab onto one of your allies and then agree to get like you want to go with the flow of the water, or maybe someone ties a rope onto themselves. And I'm going on and on about just flooding, but we've got other things too, right? We've got the classic stalagmites and those stalactites, and those in of themselves are a danger and a hazard and a great thing to do. They offer great cover depending on how big they are, because they are created by moisture and corrosive elements in the caves. So as the sediment drips that's softer than the earth around it, it turns into a point, a stalactite from the ceiling, and then when it drips down onto the floor, it's the sediment that begins to dry is left behind from the moisture, and it starts to grow as a pile. And after a while, that stone starts to turn into a point that points up, which is stalagmite. Sometimes they meet together and they make like a weird stone pillar. And then, of course, this is a fantasy realm. Some of those stalactites and stalagmites might be so huge that they are hollowed out by like the drow and turned into homes or whatever. So you could have a region where the far more powerful beings like the mind flayers, the illithids, the drow, the dwygar live above the cavern floor, and the only way to get them is to use like magic, or they have maybe special spider riders that or driders even as guards people's persons, to take you up to the surface, upside down onto the ceiling to enter into their worlds. Also, you could have things like, if they're large enough, you could have rope bridges bridging between one and another. Maybe they're tens, hundreds of feet tall. And so you can have these battles on like rope bridges that go from one to another. If they're smaller, man-sized, humanoid sized, maybe half as big to twice as big. They can be like a maze where you have a number of people, where you have cover from enemies, but maybe not cover from like area attacks, places to hide, places to sneak up on people. Yes, player characters can sneak up on people without having to have a sneak attack. The rangers just wants to hide and sneak around and such. It's also a possibility of maybe knocking them over onto people. You can have a chamber where they've already cracked and fallen, and they are bridging dangerous gaps over like flowing acid, lava, that raging river again, where the players maybe have to balance across natural stone pillars, and you can change their size. Maybe it's really narrow, like not much wider than their own feet, all the way up to maybe 20 or 30 feet wide, that have fallen over, and they have to balance and walk across them. Yeah, Vince says, "Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Had a laptop repair service here." Yeah, you don't have to apologize for being late. You guys don't have to. It's not like you have any obligation to me. I'll always be here, and I'm always appreciative of when you guys show up. And I appreciate you guys being polite as well. But yeah, no love lost. So in the underworld subterranean realm, you could always have you have a huge number of obstacles that you can create, and then have them feed off of the rest of them. So one method that I'm using in terms of writing this, one method I'm using in terms of writing this is that I'm using an aspect version of creating your own cave uh, systems. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want people to be able to design and cultivate their own version of what they want their specific subterranean realm to look like. And so in this way, there'll be many, as some people call them, tags, aspects, descriptors, and very easy things, mnemonics. I like to call them mnemonics, things that are easy for an individual to remember. So during my writing process and trying to create this, I don't want to tell you what your underworld looks like. I want to create a way so that you can tell me, hey, I've got some tools, I've got some descriptors. This is the way I think the underworld should be. So in my course of trying to discover things, I've discovered that, of course, when you go down, you begin to dig down deep. We have the crust, the mantle, and the core. And I've subdivided that to the shallow crust, which is like right above the surface. It's like, no more than 20 feet below the surface. And then you have the shallow crust and you have the deep crust. And that's almost like the geological equivalent of the top surface of the ocean. That's the area that's the most fluid, geologically speaking, and flows and moves and crashes and separates and combines together and slides against each other, creating like earthquakes and different formations and such. And is also the one that's the most biodiverse, because so many things from the surface spin and mix and disintegrate and regrow and combine together and are pushed and separated over a period of time. Of course, visually seeing it is not possible because of our lifetimes, but there are many races that do see those kind of things and see those changes, like the dwarves and the elves, classic dwarves and elves who see those kind of things. So in that shallow crust, you're going to see things like, here's some subterranean encounter creatures that you may not be thinking of, like bears and badgers and raccoons and insect hives and things like that, bats that we think of as like, oh, well, they live in caves, but they're not really subterranean, which is exactly what they are. They live in natural enclosures in the earth, but they come out onto the surface world. You can encounter them underground. We also tend not to consider the fact that there are a number of subterranean races. Dwarves and halflings and some gnomes come to mind. So they see things from a different point of view. For example, we pull carrots and beets and potatoes from the ground up, whereas they may pull them from the ceiling down. So you can reskin some of your vegetative adversaries, instead of like a treant being above badgers, insects, bears, and Batman. Everything devolves into Batman because I'm Batman. All things are answered with Batman. I know some people try to go towards everything devolves into Nazis, but I think most things revolve down to Batman. In social media wise, so in my discovery of this, I've been able to I've been able to come up with like using the crust as a different region versus the mantle, which it absolutely has like a harder stone. So there's like, of course, there's like the upper mantle and the lower mantle. You have yourself your shallow crust and your deep crust, and then there's the core of the earth where you have yourself your outer core and inner core, and you got to have a little mystery. So that inner core, I mean, is it a hollow earth? Is it like a place where the elemental forces are able to come through to this world? Is it an opening to like the fiendish realm? That's going to be up to you, but I'm going to have details in there as well. Earlier I mentioned different kinds of caves. We've got karst caves, which is more or less a surface, karst. It's a surface descriptor about how the land shifts because of erosion underneath it. But I think it's perfectly applicable for caves, where a cave may start to expand over time because something is eroding the material underneath it. Um, um, it's an egg. Vince John, the whole plan. Prue Prue says, and then Batman was a mimic. Classic DPA stream. Everything devolves into mimics. That's my thing, right? Yeah. Blame it on the mimics. Absolutely. So, well, the mimic, and there's of course there's a jaguar who's his best friend. But there's like I mentioned burrowing caves, rift caves, rift caverns created by the geological forces moving and splitting. So a cave doesn't necessarily need to be like the classic orb with stalagmites and stalactites. It might be literally like broken blocks that are split and pulled asunder, as well as scree caves, which is kind of similar to a rift cave, in which it's not necessarily one chamber. It's spaces between blocks of stone and chunks of rock and earth that have collapsed together, and you have to navigate between them. Some of these blocks of stone, upwards of tens of thousands of tons, but there's gaps in between them, kind of like navigating the debris on the surface world from an earthquake where buildings have fallen, or the collapse of a structure, and trying to navigate through that structure. It is pretty interesting. Vin says we should make a stream where everything we do is inventing new types of mimics. Yeah, and then the mimic will get the idea, like, I'm going to copy all that. Yeah, let's do that. Of course, I mentioned lava tubes and things. And in the course of my writing, I like to use a lot of identifiers and then develop off of those identifiers. So, for example, I like to write using very plain, simple stream of conscious outlines, just a ton of words. If you guys are part of the Absolute Tabletop, Tim Carney, he calls it his bucket. I suppose it is kind of a bucket, but it's like, what's the first thing I can come up with in my head that encompasses what it is I'm thinking of. And so I just sometimes what I'll do is I don't have a clear, concise idea. I just have words, descriptors, and then I can take those descriptors and move on. Like I'm looking now at my list of descriptors. Prue said, I think we already had that stream several times. Oh, hell yes. Scott poses, having fond memories of the Dungeoneer survival guide right now. The cave environment is scary. And it really, point blank, I'm trying to bring that back. So in my writing, I've gotten about, I don't know, maybe 30 pages of this so far. That would be about 15 pages printed. That's not enough. But so these are, here are some of my keywords, like incline, moss, damp, mounds, cliffs, gravel, loose stone, fumaroles, lava, geysers, lattice walls, overhangs, plateaus, boulders, fragile, shale, shafts, slide, spirals, chimneys, stairs, fungus, thin ground, smooth, flooded, webs, could go on and on and on. Waterfalls, pitted, cracked, volatile gases, collapsing ceilings, rock slides, shattering, pouring sand, sinkholes, wall of fire, mist, smoke, loud, cold, heat, dust, steam. Of course, the stalagmites, stalactites, bright, maze, confusing, blocked, cramped, crevice, shadows, suffocation, thin air, steam. These are the things that I start to build off of. That's as an example of how I start to write. So I might take one or more of those things and go, okay. In my head, I was like, some of those are very static, some of those are dynamic. That's might be a good way to divide them. Maybe in your mind, maybe you're thinking, oh, Vince says, do you have random charts for those? Dude, you gotta have random charts. Random charts is like, you disrespect the random chart if you don't make other random charts to go with it. It's like potato chips. You can't have just one. But I am deciding how I'm going to divide them up. So and I've written, so all of those keywords that I had, I've modified them. Some of them are appropriate. Some of them are more like verbs versus the noun. Others are like, like, it's cramped and blocked and tight, the same word. Sure. So you start to eradicate some, you erase those away, you combine some together. Is a flooded chamber the same thing as a flooding chamber? Not quite, but could you combine them under one heading? Maybe. How about like a wall of ice, walls of fire, walls of roots or thorns or waterfalls? Like, could you have a wall of water? Then I start getting to the little nitty gritty. Sometimes I won't even define them quite, but I will write some notes. Nested tables rule. Yeah, and so in many ways, what I'm going to do, or what I am doing, and I could change it on. Like I said, this is development process. Is that under each of the cavern types, rift caves, karst, lava tubes, corrosion caves, glacial, all those caves, I'm going to have plenty of descriptors, fluff basically, to add into it. And then on top of that, rules. What, is it, if you walk into a damp cave, is the floor slick? Maybe it's ice covered. Maybe there's cracks on the floor and it's thin. Maybe the wall is thin and there's something dangerous on the other side. Maybe you can hear the water rumbling, or the gas is flowing, or the lava, you can feel the heat from the lava or something. Also, the subterranean world is 3-dimensional, so it's possible for both players to maybe be in a undersea lake above them and then eventually climb to a cave below the lake that could flow water down into that cave from the lake above them, and using those as threats and things of that nature. Scott Post says, all those examples could have a second role scrivener passive to answer questions like, is the cave flooding now? Right. I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, you can also make random events. Yeah, Scott Post, chocolate or black? Exactly. Like you don't want to. One of the things I was talking about is like actionable writing, and it's like I could get very detailed. Like I looked up plenty of information about geological things like stones and ore and such, which I'm going to include in it. But right now I'm getting stuck about the actionable part of it. For example, is there enough difference between onyx and obsidian to warrant there to be a mechanical effect and or effect for fluff? I mean, there's plenty of gemstones, right? You've got like rose quartz and tiger's eye and amethyst and lapis lazuli and all that kind of thing, which is really good for like arcane things like spells and if it says the deliciously deadly ones. You could do those kind of things, but using those descriptors in there. But actionable, is it a hazard? Is it something that can be used? Is it something that can be cultivated, maybe for like magic spells? Maybe there's the underworld harnesses some of these where you can naturally pick one up that creates light or healing or some other magical effects. Yes. So there will be, but I'm not going to make like I could go on for thousands of different types of geological things underground, as far as finding like mineral deposits and such. So for that, got to calm that down a little bit, because it's like, well, yes, people will want some of those things, but there's only so many variations until it just becomes a list of gemstones and maybe a list of magical effects they duplicate. Minecraft vibes. Yeah. Yes, it is primitive, but digging is actually fun in this game. And of course, having to consider the fact that players may be put in a situation, or even the enemies may be put in a situation where they have to dig their way out. And so not creating rules, but just uncovering the rule system that already exists in the game and using those elements. Like is digging out something like a skill challenge? Do I look up spells like Wall of Stone? Do I look up certain creatures like oozes? and using those some one or more or all of those elements, which I actually have done, to pull into the effectiveness of like getting covered by a mudslide or a rock slide or a collapsed fall, maybe digging through a wall to escape a prison cell that someone was thrown into. Maybe the PCs are separated by a thin, maybe no more than a foot of stone, and maybe the barbarian wants to hack through it. And then you have other ideas like, why is a pickaxe and a shovel more effective than a sword or a battle axe when it comes to getting rid of stone? Well, that's because they probably have they are a tool specially designed for that environment, and so coming up with those mechanical effects as well. Also making I've spoken a lot about the natural cave systems where you can have things that are like, there's echoes, there could be moss on the ground where it's silent. Vertical shafts are another one that's a huge danger. A vertical shaft, or known as also a chimney, could be extremely smooth. It could just be like an elevator shaft. Boom, just slide, right on down, like one designed like a well. It could even be man-made with the stone that's in a big circular thing or square thing, like an elevator shaft, going down deep down into the ground. Yeah, Vincent even says, good old notched pickaxe. Exactly. Like, why the pickaxe? Well, because it probably has a greater ability to move things. There are even creatures that have a specific ability that says, does double damage to structures. So the underworld might be considered a structure and might be very difficult to harm or move unless it has this specific tag or descriptor that allows it to do far more damage to structures. If you know where I'm getting, you understand what I'm talking about. But there's also like the vertical shafts. Vertical shafts can be very tight places to fit, where you have to slide down or try to slide up and ascend. They could be like spiral staircases almost, where the shaft might be 200 feet in height, but each portion is only a 10-foot. Like, okay, I climbed myself up to this one ledge. Now I have to squeeze myself up to another ledge, and it might not be a straight line, even though a shaft could fill with water from the bottom up, causing maybe the players have to ascend very quickly, but it's a very tight space, and they're trying to, pull up their gear at the same time as the rogue is already ahead, scouting ahead, and the wizard's down behind, still trying to get that mold off of his spell book and whatnot. Yeah, and of course, Prue says dwarves with stone cutting are probably great to have with you here, and that's the thing, right? We really want to have the opportunity to have players shine, and for that person who's playing that dwarf that's always been in the woods and always been in a castle, has always been on a sailing ship, might be like, I don't get to use my stone cunning. Having stone cunning, I think, which I always think has been a strange wording, but having stone cunning might be one of your best traits, along with that dark vision down underground, and make this individual extremely important in your group, unless, of course, their attention is being split. So the dwarf is like, hey, I'm looking on the wall. Now you want me to look on the ceiling. Now you want me to go around the corner. Now you want me to do okay. Whoa. Hey guys, the ceiling's the most dangerous thing. We need to worry about that. And I hear something that's coming from on the other side of this wall. Don't bust through it. I think it's dangerous gas. And oh, by the way, it looks like there's footsteps from the troglodytes that have been tracking us. We need to double back where we came from, like something like that. Vince says, I just remembered a special magical harp in D&D 3.5. It allowed you to summon a lot of invisible workers who could dig tunnels for as long as you play. And hey, what's the there is a spell. There's a 5th edition spell that creates a magical castle, and there might be a dwarven version of the same thing with the invisible, the unseen servants, like the 100 unseen servants that dig out the cave or whatever. So instead of a castle, it could be a very a huge a monolith underground or something like that, where you have all these unseen servants. Prooper says sometimes knowing where to dig, climb or dig is as important or more than being good at climbing or digging. And again, we have our way of making. I'm just being very. You guys know I'm being very stereotypical, but the rogue who might be excellent at the climbing and the barbarian who's very strong and good at the digging may need direction from the person who knows where to climb or dig to be in a perfect position. For example, the rogue may think, hey, if I climb up onto that narrow ledge, that's a perfect place for me to sneak attack someone, whereas the dwarf might go, you don't want to be up there. That stone is too loose. You need to be on the other side of the room. I don't know, hiding behind a stalactite or something like that. So yes, finding out those dangers, where they're at, pointing them out to people, especially in combat, and being pulled in different directions, I think also creates tension as well. Vincent says Unseen Crafter. It's an Eberron spell. It has your skill ranks in crafting or job skills, which under subterranean creatures, sentient creatures will probably need if they're skilled with magic to alleviate some of those things. So earlier, I named off a ton of descriptors. And right now, I've got, I don't know, probably 25 to 30 pages of those descriptors filled out. Everything from like airless, being trapped in a cave where there's a lack of air. Of course, there's a detail about like electrical and using fire in a cave where there's a possibility of suffocation isn't really the smartest thing to do. Things like bridges or being blocked, or a place that's cavernous, where there's a shaft or the place is even clean, nooks and crannies, cramped and confusing, a place that's precarious or rough, dusty, on fire, fluid, fragile, geysers and things. And so probably some of those descriptor names will probably flow and change based on how dynamic or static I want them to be. But that's just one example of a portion of this book, just to give you guys a hint as to where I'm coming from and what I want it to achieve. Also, I want to get away from the. Vince says, "Sorry, gotta go." Yeah, see, man, we'll talk later. Absolutely. But I just want to make sure that we don't ignore the environment. We don't ignore that exploration of being able to maybe use the environment in our favor, and to also be able to make things memorable. The player character is sliding down a smooth lava tube that ends up getting, having water flow down it, and they're sliding down it like like they're at a water park or something, or like having a cave that's filling with water and they're having a fight with enemies, maybe those same troglodytes, or are adapted to swimming in the water in these flooded caves, and the players are like, oh man, they're more like, what's those shark people, Sahogan? I know I'm probably butchering the pronunciation or coming up with my own, but they're like sharks. They're like humanoid shark people, and maybe they start they get better because they live in these underground lakes, and the players are like, man, we really got to get out of here because they're starting to frenzy and we can't swim like they can. And that might force the players to have to climb up the walls. Of course, you also have to have your surface hazards underground. The weather, such as like winds, you could absolutely have wind tunnels, whirlpools, of course, cold and hot environments, not necessarily weather, but when there's lava flow, there's heat, and that heat can be oppressive. It can ignite ignitables. It can dehydrate you. The cold weather, you can have cold fingers, numb feet, frozen Frozen potions. I'll always like to come back to the frozen potion when it comes to the environment. I mean, there's so many things. Cliffs, just climbing up a stone wall in and of itself is hazardous. Where do you put your sword and shield and holy symbol and arcane focus when both feet and hands are being occupied while you're climbing? Maybe you have to make the decision to stop moving, to free your hand, to draw your sword, to fight off the giant bats. Maybe you tie yourself to an outcrop or use some sort of spell that allows you to adhere to the wall or float through the air. Here comes a great use of that levitation spell. Again, putting the barbarian on top of the floating disc might be necessary as the wizard tries to ascend. Maybe the wizard doesn't ascend. Maybe the barbarian's at the top, ties a rope around the wizard's under the wizard's armpit and is hauling the wizard up. And the wizard, by virtue of moving, is moving the floating disc with them, with the barbarian balanced precariously on top of it. I'm just making up stuff off the top of my head, but my point is to make those things memorable. Have people think of their way out of a situation, and then maybe even turn the tide. So, for example, the players are being attacked while they're climbing up a cliff. The dwarf says, "Hey, wizard, use your lightning bolt to strike right here. This will tumble rocks down on top of the troglodytes that are trying to climb up after us, or the giant spider that's coming up, or the ooze that's ascending, or the purple worm that's coming after them, and we need to drop a couple 100 tons on top of it and get the hell out of here." I think those things are great. As a game master, you're not going to run out of Underworld. You're not going to run out of Underdark passages. It is what it is. If they blow through one encounter, come up with another one, and you're done. Prue says also those things, symbols, armor, might get blisteringly hot in an environment like that. Can you even touch it or wear it? Absolutely. So they may have to make the decision of, I wrap a cloth around the handle of my sword to hold on to it, or I'm going to have to, the cleric is like, I guess my hand's just going to have to get burned as I, retrieve my holy symbol out from the lava or whatever it is. Or maybe the player characters want to lead the troglodytes into the heat because maybe they don't prefer that. And the underground nasty moss-covered or fungus-covered yetis that love the cold can't stand the passageways because of the volcanic turmoil from the deep earth that rises up to the surface, and so they stay away from this region. And the players might be forced to try to remain in that middle ground between the frozen caves and the blisteringly hot caves, and the enemies coming from both of them. Maybe there are elemental creatures like salamanders or fire elementals, or an Ifrit that's coming up from the deep core and going to release itself through the volcanic region, but it's in a frozen tundra landscape, and the players are underground, and they might be caught between a rock and a hard place, or a rock and a lava flow place. So yeah, just the underworld, a raging fire, like maybe let's say there's a methane gas that's been lit on fire already, and it could be sucking in the oxygen from a room. So it's possible the players have to either confront dangers in the cold. What's that insect creature? Ramaraz? I'm not going to look it up. It lives in the Arctic, but it has glands that burn hot on its back or stomach or something, so that it can flow through ice. And then it freezes the snow and ice behind it, making it slick. It's like an insect type creature. Anyway, Remoraz or something. Anyway, those kind of creatures might be a danger, and the players might be forced to pick between one or the other, and they may be able to say, destroy a wall to have lava flow towards the haven of these frozen insect creatures or something, or to get the yetis out of there. And again, let's go back to what Prue was saying about fungus and like disease and infection and those things can be insidious as well. especially if you. I'm going to give you a technique that can make something insidious, even though it makes it seem as if it has less of an effect. So there's some creatures or even some environments where you have to make a saving throw versus like poison or whatever, right? Not to be poisoned or a disease. Remoraz, yes, 1/8 one of my characters. Yeah, they're pretty. They like to swallow things whole, pretty much, and let it boil deep down inside of its innards. They're pretty dangerous things, man. There the Bahir is another one. It's like a centipede lightning breathing thing that likes to swallow things. Purple worms are good for that too. Yeah, and using them down in the underworld's a great thing. You can even reskin them as well. Some of these creatures, but using. I guess my thing is that using the environment is very much undersold. It's my passion. It's something that I've used for many years, and I don't want anyone to think that it is an excuse to only harm your players. But it is like this third element you can throw into the game, and don't think of it as, oh man, now this is more bookkeeping. If you think of the environment as just replacing one of your bad guys, or it is another NPC, I believe it is no more or less intrusive than any of those things. If you're still rolling for like 5 ogres, you could always roll for 4 ogres and the environment, right? And many times I think you shouldn't have to roll for anything at all. Put the danger in front of the players. They love grabbing dice. Have them make the saving throws. Have them make the ability score challenges. Have them make the skill checks in order to avoid or navigate or circumvent or use to their advantage something. If the kobolds can make a ceiling collapse, maybe have some clues that the players realize that they can do the same thing. Even something as simple as what is it? My mind just wandered on me. Weapons. When you pick up an object that is not a weapon, just picking up a brick, right? Most people go, oh well, it's an improvised weapon. It only does a D4, which actually isn't the rule. The rule is improvised weapons do a D4 unless the object picked up is more or less equal to a corresponding weapon. And I'm the game master. I can say whatever I want. I can say, okay, you pick up a small hand-sized stone. It's a D4. You pick up one that you can hold in 2 hands and slam somebody over the head. It's a D6. And then you say, okay, you're picking up a 150-pound boulder that you have to, like, in a strongman contest and drop down on somebody's head. I'll give it a D8 or even a D10. Or you might even say, hey, guess what? I'll let you add an extra die damage if you roll, but you have disadvantage to use it, right? So instead of that rock doing like a D6 or D4, you're like, yeah, it does 2D6, but you can use it with advantage because you grabbed up a really big one. You can also drop it on someone and say, okay, what are you trying to do? And they're like, well, I'm trying to pin them down. And you're like, okay, well, instead of doing damage, they're going to have to roll, or they can become restrained, or the enemy rolls so bad to make their saving throw. You're like, oh, they rolled a 3. All right, not only are they hurt, they're pinned down because the rock just crushed his chest or something like that. You can modify any of the rules that are already existent, like the I don't know what it's called. I think it's called the shove maneuver or something like that. You make a strength versus strength, and the person is moved 5 feet. Same thing here. They're climbing up after you. I'm gonna push some rocks down on top of them, and then in your head you're just like, okay, they're doing this. Just show them. They're trying to prevent them from following them. Okay, make a roll, and then instead of using strength versus strength, you could say, all right, that's dex versus dex, or intelligence versus dex. The wizard's like, I'm smart enough to know these things. The dwarf, I'm smart enough to know these things. Can I tactically point out where the bard should use their thing to pull the rope to make the the stuff fall. Yeah, Bull Rush. Matt Deadman. Hey Matt, what's up? Hope you've joined us before. If it's your first time, welcome. Good to quote unquote see ya. And thanks for sharing, man. Anytime, just pop your head on in. But long story short, I'm just giving you a little bit of an insight into me writing yet another installment in the Cinematic Environs. There's no guarantee this is guaranteed to be the next book. Battlefields is coming, Cityscapes is coming, Jungles and Swamps is coming. Forests is coming along as well. All those things. So yeah, Matt. Any information you need is down on the doobly-doo. I'm probably taking a trademark term from Matt Colville, but anyway, all the information. Who I write for, Critical Hit Publishing, the guys that I co-host the show with, RP Gamer, Vincent, Infinite Roleplay, they're down there below as well in the video. So just click. If you don't want to waste too much of your time, do your due diligence to research me and myself and what I do. I don't mind, and those kind of things. So yeah, I'm of course here 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. I say demi-daily because there will be times when I won't be able to do it, but it seems like I enjoy it too much, getting in you guys' faces. So yeah, using the environment, especially the subterranean environment, I think is undersold. Not having flat surfaces, using shafts, using tight spaces, places that are filled with dust or smoke, that are uneven, that are hard to navigate, that are confusing, that are wide open spaces that might be dangerous if enemies are on ledges, using heights such as bridges and overpasses and those kind of things down in the Underdark, having them change, be dynamic, filled with water, filled with acid, starting to collapse. Scott Post says doobly-doo is YouTube's term. I didn't know that. So fine, I'm taking it as my own. So having something filled with lava or shake from earthquakes or wind tunnels, having things where the fires being blown out, the torches go out, the flying characters and familiars and pets get blown around or something like that, or noxious gases or some making things dynamic, having them become hazards, not worrying about your players discovering your so-called traps. I think that is something else that is an undersold mistake, that some game masters want to create traps that are dynamic, and when the players find them out, they feel like their feelings are hurt. I'm like, the whole point is that they discovered it. Give them a round of applause for figuring it out themselves, right? And this also gives you're not going to run out of traps. You're not running out of dirt. You're not running out of encounters. Just make a new one. If they know that there's poison gas around, great. The next time they hear or smell the burnt almonds or the cut grass or the garlic that's supposed to represent this flammable, ignitable gas, they may use it to their advantage. They may be scared. They may think that the enemy is going to lead them into a certain place. They may want to avoid it. And so this just gives you clues as to shape the kind of underworld that you want. And you can make different underworld regions. Okay, to the upper crust in the north, it's very unstable and there's a lot of collapses. But down below and to the west, there's a lot of acid and oozes and things of that nature. To the east, it's very windy. It's for some reason that the airflow there is very strong. You can come up with these things and use that as the three-dimensional environment your underworld people live in. So for those who love dwarves that live in dwarven regions, maybe they live in the upper crust because that's where they mine, but maybe down deeper into the mantle, maybe the drow live there and there's always conflict. And in between those, maybe there's troglodytes, and each of them needs something from the other region. So maybe deep down in the mantle, they don't have access to more of the fresh water, more of the um, things that the surface world has plenty of, food and resources and such. So they need to travel up. But also maybe the dwarves have a hard time digging down below. Like one thing that I thought of was like there might be diamonds down deep in the mantle that are like the size of like a huge wagon, and there's no way to excavate them up from down deep. And maybe the people that live down deep are like, you know what, I hate that damn diamond, it's in the way. Like we just need to make a passage, but every time we dig we have to go around it, um go under it, go over top of it. We just need one straight shaft or tunnel, and these damn diamonds are always in our way. And then maybe the mage is going, oh, oh, that huge diamond is making me moist, I can have so many resurrections. Or I don't know, what's the thing where you put your soul into the jar, or you put somebody else's soul into the jar with a diamond or something. Like, they're like, yeah, we could really do that. Or even maybe the dwarves are like, oh, we would love to carve that thing. Oh man, a 15-ton diamond, sweet. And so you could have different elements where you have different encounters and stuff. Bruce says sometimes you got to trade with people you don't like for stuff you want or need. Real world, yes. We all need to live. We need fresh water, fresh foods. We need supplies. We need tools, armor, weapons, and even great enemies will put aside their differences because they need trade. Or you may have small factions that are like, look, our people, the dwarves and drow, are like, we fight all the time, but look, you and I are business people. You're merchants, we're merchants. Let's just put it aside. We have silkworms, we have salt, we have limestone. You guys have I don't know, amethyst. You guys have purple worm meat. You guys have spider silk. We'll absolutely trade with those things. We've got potatoes and beets. You guys have fungus cakes that we love so much. Let's go ahead. Let's trade up. Let's get the hell out of here. And of course, there may be factions that want to disrupt that. There might be dwarves that are like, what the hell are you doing trading with them? F them. And then you're like, yeah, but right now you're talking to me. You've got fungus cake all in your beard. So don't tell me who I need to, deal with, as if I know what these people would sound like. So anyway, guys, long story short, use the environment. Yes, subterranean's coming along, forests are coming along, jungles and swamps probably is going to get combined together. So far, cityscapes is going to be a thick one. It hopefully it'll be timed out because we have Dragon Heist released, Ravnica's released. The timing maybe could have been a little bit better. I'm not sure how they're going to handle doing city exploration, but I would love to have them put in a ton of, well, maybe I don't want them to put in a ton of like running through roofs and alleyways and up and down, climbing in and out of windows and falling through skylights and pushing through crowds, and the classic bazaar where you have someone chasing someone else through a bazaar and they're running on top of the awnings and knocking over fruit carts. You got to have a fruit cart knocked over. Executions in the public square, and the hero, does the Assassin's Creed leap over everyone and stabs someone in the throat while everyone looks around and is taken aback and crestfallen or something. You got to have those things in the city. So yes, Battlefields is another one. I am a big fan of Dan Carlin's hardcore history. Most importantly, listening to his dissertation, I believe it's maybe good 12 to 15 hours on World War I. Each episode is almost like 3 to 4 hours a piece. And I very much associate World War I with what magic would be like in a medieval setting with war. He makes a comment saying that technology allowed even small countries to take a punch, and instead of wars being over quickly, they extended out. So I'm using that as um, a backdrop of sorts, a rules system of sorts in writing to describe battlefields in a medieval setting, and using, of course, having magic as part of that. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. As always, these hour vlog casts are never an hour. It's always a lot more than that. But I just like talking about things, talking things out, interacting with you guys, essentially world building, encounter building, just doing cleaning out the cobwebs of the head, maybe having someone who hadn't thought of something else, give them something to think about as well. Like, oh man, I didn't think about that. That's great. And then having you guys interject as well. So again, thank you very much for joining me. I'm DBJ. It's RPG with DBJ. I'm here Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Unfortunately, people are making the noticing that they're not getting the notifications. Prue, see you later. Guys, have a very good day. Sorry about not getting those notifications, but that's YouTube for you. You know, they're making it harder and harder for us smaller vlogcasters. That's why people are going on to Twitch and other places. So Scott Post says good stuff as always. Thanks, man. And thank you for being up. You are up far earlier than I am out there in Arizona, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so thanks guys very much. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Future Friday. Do I know what the subject is? Not particularly, but I'll come up with something. Probably going to talk about UBI, which is a universal basic income, because I tend to fall towards futurism, like post-humanist kind of things, but whatever. If someone comes up with a great idea, I promise to be in the Discord far more often for those of you who join the Discord. Prue has also suggested talking about heists. I may blend in the heist with that one too, although that probably deserves its own thing. So guys, have a good one.